Coming up, a conversation with the Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nation. That's next on Perspectives. Hello everyone, I'm Sam Jones. It's not a symbolic job. Principal Chief of one of the largest, in fact, the largest Native American tribe in the nation involves hard work and constant attention to detail. Our guest today, Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. of the Cherokee Nation. Chief, welcome.
Good to be with you, Sam.
Better still to have you with us. We're thrilled to death to have you. Newly elected,
Right.
You hit the ground running, but before we get to tribal business and everything that's going on with you, where exactly are you from?
I'm from Veneta, just up the road. Lived there all my life. I was actually born in Claremore at the Indian Hospital, but
Really?
a lifelong resident of Veneta.
So this is your old stomping ground.
This is where it started.
Holy Toledo. How'd you get interested in politics?
Well, I always had an interest in history and civics, things of that nature. My father was a candidate for tribal council in 1995. I was a teenager, and he ran for Cherokee Council, won. He served 12 years on the council, went on to serve in the legislature for 12 years, representing our home area. And so that's really part of what sparked it, just sort of a general interest in history and civics, and then looking at my father's example of public service.
Well, it's amazing to me that the people, and when I say the people, I mean tribal members,
Right.
The people seem to recognize the better qualities of candidates when they run for office. And boy, they can zero in on them in a hurry.
I think that's true.
So I think that speaks volumes to you.
I appreciate that.
What you were involved in tribal politics a little bit before. Were you?
True. I when my father left the council, the Cherokee Council, I ran for the seat that he occupied and won and served for 6 years. I was elected twice. Right after my second election, Bill John Baker, then the Principal Chief, asked me to be the Secretary of State. He had a vacancy due to the passing of the Secretary of State at that time, and I left a career that I was in doing labor law and became Secretary of State. Really enjoyed it. So that's what I did really the past 5-6 years. And when he term limited in 2019, this year's election, I ran. So here we are.
When you say labor law, was that Indian labor law?
No, it actually was labor and employment law. I worked for a federal agency called the National Labor Relations Board, and then on the that was my full-time vocation. But I was a member of the Council of the Cherokee Nation, and honestly, it felt like I had 2 full-time jobs, because when you're on the Council of the Cherokee Nation, you put your all into it. That's what my father taught me, and that's
Sure.
what I did. So serving as Secretary of State, though, whole other deal, sort of a national perspective on our government, representing us in Washington, D.C., Oklahoma City, just a great training ground for me as a future chief. I also felt like I could make a difference under that chief, Bill John Baker.
Rumor has it that the people feel as though you've got an open door policy.
That's true, and that's sort of, again, the example of people that mentored me. My father, Chief Bill John Baker. Chief Baker, every time the phone would ring, he picks it up and takes the call. His door was open. He would take, as part of his staff, he would probably take more meetings than we wanted him to, because we felt like, we have to make sure that he can get his job done. But he just had this enormous capacity for doing the job and also meeting with people that needed to see him, citizens, other folks from outside the tribe. So that's the example that I had, and I've tried to keep that up as chief.
When I moved here back in 1980, my interviews with the chiefs of the tribe started with Ross Swimmer. And I've gotten to know the folk who have been chief over the years to present, to where we are now. I recall that the big push when I came here had to do with plants and trees and that sort of thing.
Right.
An industry that they were trying to get launched, and it proved to be very successful.
It was. I mean, I think, every Cherokee leader has done something to move the tribe forward, they do so in the context in which they're serving. And so at that time that you're talking about, our ability to generate revenue was much less than it was now, but they did amazing things. So you're talking about the nursery business that we had. You know, yesterday I was at Cherokee Nation Industries in Stillwell, where 50 years ago, before we really reconstituted ourselves in the 1970s, we started a business that really started a spark of hope for our people, manufacturing, showing the world that Cherokees could compete, we could win, we could generate revenue. That all happened in Stillwell. And so we've really been on a steady progression since then, expanding what we do from a business standpoint, expanding what we do in terms of government services. All of that really feeds into each other.
And it's all interconnected. I know Wilma was involved, Wilma Mankiller was involved in bringing water to rural Cherokees.
Absolutely. So Wilma Mankiller, just an iconic leader really in this country, but certainly for the Cherokee people. And what she did with the Bell water line and other projects, I think also showed that the government of the Cherokee Nation, when we were allowed to self-govern, which keep in mind during most of the 20th century we were not allowed to do, but she showed the world that when we were allowed to do it, that we could do it well, we could take care of our people, and we could go in areas that the rest of the world forgot about. But the Cherokee Nation didn't forget about it because it was our people, our community. She showed us that, and that's something that inspires leaders still today.
You know, other tribes around the country look to the Cherokees once they're able to do this or do that and say, can you help us?
That's true. I think whether it's us leading on public policy, so policy that's good for Indian country, or us leading by example from what we do in our government. We're a very transparent tribal government, or what we do in terms of our businesses. I see us leading today, but leading, you know, a generation ago when you're talking about Chief Mankiller, Chief Swimmer. That's something that's a point of pride for Cherokee Nation and Cherokee leaders. But at the same time, I think we earn that reputation not just because of our success, but because we work well with other tribes. We show other tribes respect. We open our doors to them, and we learn from them, of course,
and that's
too.
The key word is show respect.
Show respect. That's the key in any part of this world, really.
It is. That's terrific. How are we okay on time? Excellent. All right. Well, the Cherokee people kind of turned a corner with the introduction of bingo. And the folk in Oklahoma City said, oh, that's fine, it's harmless. And then came gambling.
Right.
Then came the machines, and all of a sudden, Cherokee people are talking serious money here.
Right.
Now, there was a contract agreed to by the tribes, that's plural.
Right.
And here we are all of a sudden with a new governor saying, well, you know, we ought to redo this. What's your position?
Well, my position is consistent with the position of all tribal leaders. In fact, the solidarity among the tribes, I think, says something about where we are in terms of how the tribes work together. And our position is that the compact is a win-win proposition. You know, it was a grand bargain, some 13 years ago, and it's worked then and it works now. From a legal standpoint, we know that this compact will roll over. It will evergreen, as they say. The old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So that's our position. It's win-win. I mean, you can look at what the Cherokee Nation, for example, has done during the past decade, let's say, and you could look at what the state of Oklahoma has done. We both had the opportunity with these gaming revenues to do great things within our government. If you look at what Cherokee Nation's done, every penny, Sam, of these dollars that we generate at our casinos and our other businesses go to the Cherokee people to support them in what they want to do, education, healthcare, housing, also into the communities where they live. So that means infrastructure, opportunities for economic development. What that means is it's win-win for everyone in those communities, whether you're Cherokee or not. Now, the state of Oklahoma during the past 10 years, they've bounced around from fiscal crisis to fiscal crisis.
No kidding.
I think part of it's long-term structural tax issues, but I think it's also decisions they made during that same decade. And so here we are. I have some sympathy for the governor. He comes in to a state where the cupboard's kind of bare in terms of revenue. But I think the governor is looking to the tribes for increased revenue. And what we say is that we've contributed mightily to this state's coffers. And we've done more than that. If you go, Sam, to any county in northeastern Oklahoma and talk to a county commissioner, if you go and talk to a school board member in just any town across northeastern Oklahoma, or a superintendent, a mayor, somebody involved in economic development in some of these small towns that are on the ropes, they say Cherokee Nation is in our corner. Cherokee Nation has contributed to our public schools. Cherokee Nation has helped build roads. They see us as a partner because we are a partner. We really view this as we're all in it together. And so our position is it's working. Why do we want to fix it? And if the state has issues with revenue, they may want to look at the big picture. They may want to look at decisions they've made over the past 10 years that perhaps has gotten us to a point in this state where the state's had to retreat from public education, retreat from higher education, retreat from infrastructure projects because the money hasn't been there. They need to look at what they've done the last 10 years, fix that before they go trying to balance the budget on the backs of the tribes.
Which is questionable at best, because I know that the Real ID Act that should have been passed 14 years ago is still being debated.
A lot of those things are being debated for years, and the state gets bogged down in some of those issues.
Yeah.
I think the issues that I see affecting Oklahomans day to day are issues like education and whether the roads are good, whether they're safe, whether we're engaged in the type of economic development that can help rural Oklahoma in particular. That's where a lot of our people live. And I see the state could do some things to improve, but I think looking at the tribes essentially for a bailout is not something that's something that we agree with, because we've already been leading on
Let's
those
underscore
issues.
something that you touched on briefly. To say that Cherokee money has not helped education outside the tribe is a falsehood.
It's an absolute falsehood, and just ask presidents of some of the colleges and universities in this state, and they'll tell you what I can tell you, which is that we have doubled the amount of scholarship money we have given to our people. I say given, it's an investment. But what that means in a state that has cut its higher education, it means that they've had to increase tuition and fees. Well, what about these Cherokee students? They're bringing in $2,000 a semester in Cherokee Nation dollars for a scholarship. That's an investment in higher education. The presidents of colleges know this, and universities. Ask a superintendent who was a recipient of part of the $5.5 million that we gave to public schools just last year, and we've done it every year for more than a decade. Why do we do it? Because our kids go to school there. Why do we do it? Because Cherokee leaders and Cherokee people know that the strength of a community really rises and falls based on the strength of its public schools. And we're in a state that has retreated from public education in terms of funding. We have leaned in. We have said we will give you the funding to do with what you want because we believe in public education.
They should realize that. They should realize that. We're going to take a short break.
Okay.
And we'll come back with more from the chief right after this.